Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. Today I am with Dan Riba, an animation legend. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Wow,
Uh,
legend.
you worked on the DC animated universe shows. It is 20 years. This November is 20 years since the debut of Justice League.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It
Uh,
feels like yesterday.
Do you remember how it felt when it first came out?
Um, I remember making it, so that was yeah. Sure. I remember what it was like when it came out, but you know, it's like nothing can compete with sort of that feeling of when Batman came out or Superman. It's like it was like yeah, it was great, but it's like it was just a little different. You only get that first shot at doing that first thing the first time once, kind of.
Well, speaking of the first time, you actually worked on those two individual shows.
Yes,
You worked on
yes,
Batman and you worked on Superman.
yes.
Do you have a favorite between the two?
Well, it's like I cut my teeth on the Batman stuff at Warner. So, I had directed a little bit of Deke before that on
Mhm.
on Alf, a few other things. So it wasn't like it was the first time I directed, but it really was, you know, it was special.
Do you have a favorite episode of Batman that you directed? You did Zatanna, Blind as a Bat, Fire from Olympus, Riddler's
Baby
Reform,
Doll,
Baby Doll.
Riddler's Reform. Um, I probably, um, probably Baby Doll, but there are aspects of all of them that I really, had a lot of fun with, and so But I think because of the weirdness and the tragic aspect of it and the comedy aspect of it, and just it's like this very odd fish, that show. It doesn't it doesn't really fit into any one hole, it's very noir in spirit, even though it's like this little Shirley Temple cutie cartoony character. Really weird, but it's a neat show.
Did did Dick Tracy villains come into your mind at all when you guys were making Baby Doll?
Kind of, kind of. I mean,
Yeah.
but then again, Batman and Dick Tracy shared a lot of sensibilities, in terms of villain. So, in fact, Two Face was ripped off by Dick Tracy.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that's true.
yeah, so it actually kind of like, yeah, there was, you know it was an inspiration, clearly, but then on the other hand, it bounced back and forth.
How was the process of directing animation like? Because I think everyone has a preconception of what directing live action is like,
Mhm.
but animation is different, right? Because you get the voices first, and then yeah.
Right. Um, it isn't like feature directing, where you're involved in everything in terms of like directing actors and things. When you have Andrea Romano, you don't really direct the actors. She does it,
Mhm.
and she's brilliant. You're an idiot to sort of get in the way of that brilliance. So um so there is that. So you're supported so much when you're doing a quality TV production. But what you're doing mainly is focusing on story and interpretation of the script. So you're casting the board artist, you're notating, you're handing them out, you're giving them the material. Um, you're you're inspiring your board artist to do the you know, the way the script indicates. It all starts with the word and then your interpretation of that word. And and if you're cast it right, it's kind of like Hitchcock says, it kind of makes itself to some degree.
Mm.
The actors are, you cast it, it's all in the storyboarding and in the casting, and and then it's like in casting the board artist, it really helps a lot, you know. Um, and that was kind of, it's like directing traffic. There's a lot of little things to deal with, and then a lot of technical to deal with, timing and effects and all that stuff. You have to be the person point person to answer all the questions. So it was a fun job.
It sounds like if you cast the right people and you just put them all together, and then your job becomes more about filling in the gaps and
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
make
Um,
making sure
yeah,
both hands know what they're doing.
exactly. And I was always like into the technical aspects, so effects and things like that. When we did the my clocking episode, um, what was
I'm
that?
out of joint.
I'm out of joint, and there was a super speed kind of thing because he's dealing with the device that deals with time. So I came up with the cycles for the force shield thing, for the smear effect, for the clocking when he smears into the scenes and out of them. And and so that was really fun. And then on Superman, I did the same thing. I came up with the smear for Superman. He kind of zips into a room because we adapted the thing episode. Um, that was
I'll tell you this. I'm so glad you said baby doll because as a 12-year-old kid watching it, that episode ended, and I think I just stared at my TV for like a little bit. I was like, wait, what just happened? That was so disturbing.
isn't it? Wasn't
Yeah,
it though? I mean, it's like it's so sad and yet I really it's a heartbreaking episode really.
it really
Uh,
is.
and it seems like it's like oh it's all for laughs and it's cute and everything, but it really isn't. It's actually it's funny because I went to the School of Visual Arts while Will Eisner was teaching, and so the spirit was like one of the big things in my life. As I really adore that comic, and and of all of my episodes, I think that one kind of feels the most like a spirit situation.
I can see that because it more focuses on the person outside of the protagonist, outside of Batman, and then right.
Exactly, exactly. It, that was my influence. We're showing on that.
Do you have a favorite Will Eisner spirit episode?
Oh boy.
I like it when I ask my interviewees stuff that makes them fans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many. And there's a one where he goes down to a crime convention in a Latin American town, Caramba, which
Mm-hmm.
is really cool. But I think the one that hits me the most, and I do love the one where the guy can fly, the Gerard
George
Schnabel
Noble.
one. I love that one. But I think the one that really hit me the most was the one I saw in the Stranko History of Comics, the paraffin case, the one with the woman who begs the spirit to prove her guilty of killing her husband.
Yeah.
Um, and that was such a well written and just beautiful, beautiful story. It was so well done, so moody and so cool. And I just I put the shadows in that thing, and it was so cool. I really, really loved that. Oh,
I'd
that one hit.
I'd heard that when you guys were working on Batman, one of the main influences that I think Bruce Timm said he was trying to not do it, but then he just eventually had to admit he was actually doing it was Fleischer Superman.
Well, yeah, I mean honestly, that was kind of the edict from Gene McCurdy, which how can I put this? I was so shocked by this idea that she actually knew the cartoons and wanted to do Batman that way. I kind of felt like, oh, she's an executive who's just, oh yeah, that's a thing to point to reference for people to know what this is going to look like. I didn't realize that she actually was the one who suggested it. Because she's how it was surprising to me, So that was really cool. That was really cool. I mean, I really like Jean, and she actually, she's responsible for Bruce and Eric doing the show. So we owe her everything.
That's a good set of influences to have, though. Fleischer Superman and Will Eisner.
Really, right, right. And, and it's funny because when I was at School of Visual Arts, I had wanted to make an animated spirit, and I mentioned it. I brought my Super 8 film of the Fleischer Superman cartoons to show, well, look, this stuff can be animated, and look at how Schuster's style was adapted. You could actually adapt your style in animation, and it could work. And he was like, yeah, that could work. And I didn't realize that at the time I was essentially shilling for Brad Bird and Gary Kurtz and people who were actually at that time trying to get that off the ground. And so when I asked him, later on, I'm like, so would you ever mind if I ever did? And he's like, I just signed I just signed off on,
Oh,
but it was Brad Bird, for crying out loud. It would have been
yeah.
awesome. It would have been great. It would have been
That's one
great.
of those big what ifs
Yeah,
in comics
yeah,
and animation, I think.
yeah.
Speaking of Superman, you also obviously worked on Superman. In a
Yes.
Facebook group that you and I are both in, you have said that you have a favorite Superman story from every decade.
Oh, I did say that, didn't
Yes,
I?
you did.
Oh my goodness. Sure. Let's see. Well, 30s is going to be tough because those are early on. I probably, uh, because I don't remember exactly when the Mixes Pitlick issue when that came out, but
The
that
first
was
one?
the first one. Yeah, yeah, that one really struck me because I had that book, the Superman from the 30s to the 70s, and
Yeah.
because those early issues were rarely reprinted. After a while, they just kind of stuck with the 40s and 50s stuff. They didn't publish
Yeah.
a lot of the Siegel and Schuster stuff,
Except for Action One.
except for Action One. They would republish that a lot.
Yeah.
And that stuff was neat. I really loved it. But I just, that first Mixie story is so funny and it's so weird.
So how did you
Um,
feel when you were directing Mixes Pixelated?
it was a dream come true because this was a comic that I had read as a child, and the whole idea of McGurk. A second, where got my I've got my McGurk. Hold on. There it is. Yeah, my reference. I went to the Norton Simon Museum and took a
Yeah.
picture of that. And that's how into it I was. I wanted this to be like, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect.
Is that why your design, the design for Mixes Pitlick in the cartoon is closer to the Golden Age design?
Honestly, I think so. That wasn't my call. That was Bruce.
Yeah.
So I just went with it because I thought, I think the thinking was that was so clearly inspired by Egghead, the proto Elmer Fudd character in the Warner Brothers cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just kind of like, we're a cartoon. Let's not only just honor the original Mixes Pitlick, but the origins of that and make it feel kind of like an old Looney Tunes kind of thing. And that would fit better for our needs than the little funny spaceman with the bowler, the little sort of 50s thing, which is a really charming design. I remember I kind of disparaged it in the DVD, going, nah, it's actually really cute. It's cool. It is cool. He had these little bulgy eyes and a long nose. It was kind of creepy. It was weird because the artists weren't as cartoony as early stuff. So it was this weird, realistic, cartoony thing. It's strange looking.
The perfect voice too.
Yes, Gilbert was
Yeah,
brilliant,
Gilbert
absolutely
Gottfried.
brilliant. I wish he had flown out for it, but they did a phone patch thing.
Okay. That's how you guys
Yeah,
do
so I
most
haven't met him.
everything now, right? You do it through Zoom
Well,
or
now because of COVID, sure, but
I
back
think you guys will
back
go
in,
back to face-to-face recordings.
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I haven't participated in a recording for a while. That's one of the cool things about Warner Brothers when you're directing there, because you know you get involved with that and you're asked, the reason, yes, I don't direct the voice because Andrea's brilliant, brilliant director of animation voice. But, um, she doesn't know how you're planning to draw it. She just knows what's in the script and she knows it intimately. She reads them like, and pores over it and goes over and asks a million questions. How far are they apart? There's a helicopter. Do they need to yell? Things like that. And there's always these questions that only somebody who's going to be drawing it is going to have an idea of like, oh, I think it's going to be this. So you're there and you help her with that. But mainly just get out of the way because
Yeah.
her choices and Bruce's choices for like which take to use generally are fine. They're perfect. Sometimes you really go, the second one was what we kind of need more. And the only thing I tend to get involved in when it was that, is just things like laughs and screams and
Uh-huh.
things like that, where you're dealing with time lengths in animation. You have a finite amount of time to tell the story. And sometimes you have to cut things shorter. And if you have a really long laugh, you screw it, I can't do we need so you ask for alternates and you get like different lengths of screams. If somebody falls off a cliff, you can change how long he falls by how long he screams and things like that. And it's like, oh, it's not enough. It's just like a little yelp. We need a long or and you have to be kind of like, can I have another one, just like a longer one? Because that's usually what I would request when I was at a record. More than anything, it's this change of length of those sounds.
What is your favorite Superman story from the 50s?
Um, let's see. I believe no, actually, that was like in '49. Maybe it was the '50s. The first meeting of Superman and Batman, the world's finest, because for the longest time they never met. They were
Mm-hmm.
they were separate, and they're on a ocean liner, and I
They,
thought that was really cool.
they happen
I
to be
thought that was really
changing in the
cool.
same room.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I also found the Wayne Boring retelling of the origin story is really, really very poignant. There was a lot of those stories.
It's unfortunate you didn't get to direct that one for when they first meet.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't. But come on, the TMS did a magnificent. Sometimes it's cool to just sit back and watch other people.
You did direct the Demon Reborn, which I think
Yes,
that's the
I
one
got to
where
do Ra's al Ghul. Yeah,
you
yeah,
got to do
yeah.
Rachel Gould
I did get to do them together before Justice League. Yeah,
before Justice
that was
League.
fun.
What
Yeah,
about the 60s?
the '60s, Superman '60s. Let's
Mhm.
see.
There's
Let
so
me
much
see.
from the 60s.
There is. Um, oh man, uh, there was like a for some reason this one really struck me, and I don't know why, and I can't. It was like one of the later Wayne Boring ones. Like he was like on the way out, but it was like, and it was this character that was clearly supposed to be like Hercules, but it was like Captain Marvel. He was
Mm-hmm.
like
Javam.
Shavam, and I remember that one really being impressive because it was like, oh, this is a magical, it was another superhero-y type character, and they were trying to make it Captain Marvel, but not really Captain Marvel because they just,
Because you
so
can't. Because you
you
can't.
can't. They put them out of business. So,
Yeah. What about the
so
70s?
'70s. Well, it's got to be the Kryptonite No More. That
Ah,
story was really impressive.
Neil
I
Adams.
the Neil Adams cover.
Yeah.
I wish he had done the inside. I like Kurt Swan. He's fine. I like him, but I really am more uh, old school. I kind of like the Wayne Boring goofy stuff. There's something about his goofy way of Superman flying that was just so archetypical to me. I mean, I love the Schuster stuff that because of the Fleischers, and
Yeah.
but it's like, and he was like the perfect bridge because he had been an assistant, so he kind of like, just kind of he's like that bridge between the '40s and the '60s. It's neat.
I get Wayne Boring had such a big Superman that
He's
was
like
just
this
so
big
fun to look at.
trunk. He was just like this big trunk, and he had this weird way of walking when he flew. It was just like he just had this his legs are always like, and it was like he had forgotten, like he never got the memo, that Superman isn't leaping. It
Yeah.
was just like, you know,
You still draw
it's
him
like
running.
he's still drawing running in space. He's just like, it's so cool. I don't know. I like it.
In tiny little cape.
Yeah, yeah, the tiny little cape and that big trunk. It's just like this big dad bod kind of.
What about the 80s? Do you have a favorite 80s one?
Well, I mean, you know, um, oh gosh, there is that Ellen Moore thing that we adapted. That was pretty impressive, and that was
For the man
amazing.
who has
For the
everything.
man who has everything.
Yeah.
That's probably like my favorite then, and then the Burn stuff was pretty impressive. I really liked the way when that began. That was pretty cool. So
So this is the part where it might be impossible for you to be unbiased. What about the 90s?
it's hard. It's hard. I don't know.
Is it your cartoon?
Well, what can I say?
Do you have a
Well,
favorite episode of the Superman animated series that you directed? Because you directed the first, you directed two of the first three. The Last Son of Krypton, you directed parts
mhm,
1 and part 3.
yeah,
You also directed Blasts from the Past,
right.
Mixes Pixelated, The Hand of Fate.
Yes,
And for me, the big one is you directed the Apocalypse episodes, the Dark Side
right,
ones, as
right,
well as the finale.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty lucky. Those are all pretty fun. I There are aspects of all of them that I love. Um, getting, but the privilege of Apocalypse Now, getting to do Kirby's work. When I first came out to Los Angeles, I got a job at Ruby Spears, and Jack Kirby was a regular contributor to character designs and promotional design, promo stuff that they were like coming up with
I feel like there are
presentation.
anecdotes here.
Yeah, there's some actually. I got to ink one of his pieces, which was unbelievable. That was such a privilege. And Kirby was so kind. He was so nice because I'm this kid that just is so completely undeserving of this honor. But they were trusting me with this, this comic book god, at this work. And so, but he was so gracious when he looked at it, and he's just like, oh, this is just like in the old days. He was so complimentary and so sweet. He was such a kind man. Um, and his wife Roz would go in and negotiate for the money. She was like his business, was the manager,
Yeah.
and she would always go in the back office and negotiate. And then while all of us would just like sit and ask him questions, and he just, he was really. And I asked him about, which is really funny because on the comic itself, it actually says "Don't ask, just buy." But I asked him anyway about the Goody Rickles, Don Rickles comic,
Mhm.
and Jimmy Olsen. And he just said, "Oh, I'm just a big fan, and I always wanted to write for him. I'd watch him on the Tonight Show and want to write for him." And then it turns out that when you read Mark Evaniers', backstory about the whole thing, there's much more to that story than that. But he just like cut to the chase. He just simplified the story and I just liked it. Um, but so yeah, that was really fun. That was really. I
I
actually.
always imagine Jack as having like, he's so into his imagination
Mhm.
that maybe some details of the real world didn't really land or something. Like that's why
Well,
he had Roz to deal with the negotiations and everything.
yes, and um, there's that. And she always looked out for him. She always protected him. So there was that also. The other thing, what you just said is interesting because apparently there's an early San Diego Con thing where he drew a picture of himself like, with in a car accident or something. And apparently he was able to drive, but Roz didn't let him drive because if exactly that, his imagination, he would see something and just be like, wow. He was always so focused on ideas, and things would be in his head all the time, that apparently he wasn't a safe driver. Um, and so she drove him everywhere. She drove him everywhere. And it wasn't like, oh, he can't drive. He could drive. He wasn't safe. Because he was just like, he had the universe in his head.
He had the mechanical skills for driving, but
Oh
probably
yeah,
not the concentration to do so.
that's exactly it. I mean, it's not like he wasn't like on a phone or anything like that. He wasn't texting people. It was his brain. He was constantly thinking about things and constantly like, oh, there's an idea and there's something there, and he's just like always thinking about stuff.
I love it. So when you got to adapt Apocalypse Now, like, because that was Apo- Darkseid had been built up pretty much from the start of
Yes,
the whole thing.
yes,
So you got to direct both episodes. I have a friend who says
yeah.
this is the best the New Gods have ever been.
Well, there I would be biased. Yeah, well, sure. but what do I know? We just made this stuff. But yeah, I kind of do agree. I think we got it.
Yes.
And it was, you know, there's the thing. It's like Jack's like spirit was like all over the show because he passed away just before we went into production. And one of the things that had happened early on was like Bruce had originally wanted to make the show feel like Fleischer. He kind of poo-poos that, but no, it is reality. He kind of thought initially like, oh, we're just going to go and do like, you can see the designs of his take on it, and it is very much like a Wally Wood version of like that, like the when he was doing the Justice Society book, that Superman stuff, without the great temples. It was like a little wider eyed, but it was like that the version, and it was really gorgeous. And that was what we were going to do initially. And both Gene and Warner Brothers were like, no, we don't want it to be retro. We want it to be today. We want it to be. This isn't taking place in some fake 40s world like that. We want kids to be able to relate. And it was like, oh,
I saw those original designs.
right?
Yeah,
It's gorgeous.
they're great.
Brainiac looked like some 50s, like, you know, robot monster thing. It was really cool. But what the bonus of that is that look, that retro look, probably wouldn't have been as welcoming to the Kirby design.
Mm,
And
that's
so when
true.
we realized that, that was the bonus. It's like, wait, we can't do that, but why don't we like lean into Kirby and kind of like get, you know, that'll be our sensibility with it's like, look, he did Jimmy Olsen. It's not like he didn't do Superman. That was like, he was a part of that world. Um, so that's what we did. Um, I mean, that was the first time you saw Darkseid was in a Jimmy Olsen comic.
Yeah.
So um, he's miscolored, but it's still, it's him. We know. So uh, that was really cool. And then the other thing that happened that we did actually go to Jack's funeral,
Mm-hmm.
which was like down the street from where Bruce lived. So we all took a break that day, and it was profoundly moving. See everybody who's anybody in comics there. Um, Stan Lee was even there. So that idea of the end of Apocalypse Now was literally a tribute to Jack,
Yeah.
not just in spirit. That was essentially his funeral. So all those, guest stars and all that stuff that we were doing was sort of a tribute to what 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 that funeral was really like.
I
And
I one of the reasons that funeral really stuck out to me because I think I must have been like 7, maybe no 15 at the time. And I was living in the Philippines, so there's not much exposure to Jewish culture here. So when I saw the funeral, I think it might have been the first time in pop culture that I saw something
yes,
so explicitly Jewish.
yes,
And yeah,
and that's why. It was because that was Jack's funeral, and we were just like, this has to be, because I mean Dan Turpin is, he's like an old Irish cop. That's not, I don't, but then Kirby isn't, you know, that's an old Irish name. So it's not, he adopted that name, later on. So it's like, why not? That's why we made Jack Kirby's image that Dan Turpin.
mm-hmm.
Originally, in the comics, I've heard that, although, you have to ask Mark Evanier, I don't, but, Turpin in the comics wore the bowler hat and he was like this rough cop. People think that he might be, at least superficially, maybe inspired by one of the uh, boy commandos growing up, Brooklyn, because he wore the same hat. So there was that talk.
Did you create Dan Turpin to look like Jack specifically because you knew you wanted to eventually do his funeral?
No, no, that just, we were doing a tribute to him, and that was all there was. We just thought it would be really cool to have Jack Kirby be in our show,
That's
and
cool.
and then when it came down to like the sacrifice and the death, it was sort of like one of those things where, um, initially Darkseid's Zeta beams just transport them to the minds of
Apocalypse.
Apocalypse, and uh, and that's what the network thought when we zapped,
Got it.
right? So they had assumed that the intention, and we had actually too, we really had intended at some point that we were going to bring it back. There was was it Little Girl Lost? There was one where we went back to Apocalypse and, well, eventually Legacy, But I think I was the thing in Legacy. I think he was going to find Turpin in the, in the mines and save him and bring it back. And it was going to be like our last episode thing. And what ended up happening was, the funeral was so profound, and the tribute to Kirby, at the end, it was sort of like, it would be kind of a slap in the face of that moment if we just said, no, it wasn't real.
Yeah.
So what had, and I heard that, I remember Bruce saying somebody in an interview that we had never intended to. And I'm like, I kind of remember we sort of did, but maybe he didn't, but I sort of remember that, there was that idea of bringing it back. And then
Yeah.
at some point, I remember me being told, no, that's not, that'll just ruin that episode. Yeah, you're
It had the best line for me. It has the best line in the whole series. In the end, the world didn't need a Superman, just a brave one.
just brave. That's really like one of that's our with great responsibility, right? It's like, that's a really good one. And that's kind of what, it's so inspiring, because it really is. The idea of Superman is supposed to be like, he's supposed to inspire us all to want to do better and to help the world play. So, you know,
I'd heard that there was some creative difficulty trying to figure out the footing for Superman, and I think that's partly because you guys would have wanted to set him in a retro era at first, or is there
yeah,
just some
but
hangover from working on Batman?
a little bit. That's kind of what it was. But initially, I mean, yeah, I was personally looking forward when I saw Bruce's initial designs. I was like, oh my gosh, I want this show. This is like, you have no idea. The Fleischer cartoons were so inspirational to me as a kid. I found them when I was 14 at a convention, and I'm old enough, born in 1960. Apparently, they were running on TV like in the 50s. But by the time I was a kid, locally, they didn't run them anymore. So my generation did not grow up with these cartoons. We never saw the Fleischer cartoon on TV. So at least in the Washington D.C. area, we missed them. That was something from the 50s. So at 14, I'm at a convention, and I'm a big fan. I love, but I'd actually kind of moved away from Superman because I was like, it's kid stuff. And I love George Reeves, and great, really loved it. But it's like I moved on to Batman and other cooler things. But then when I saw those, my brain exploded.
I'm back.
Yeah, exactly. He pulled me back in. Yeah, no, I was in love with those things, and I went on a passionate search to find them.
Find them all.
Yeah, And I didn't have a 16 millimeter projector. I couldn't afford this stuff anyway. So I just watched all he had. He didn't have all 17. He only had about 5 or 6 of them. And he ran them over and over again for me. And it was cool because, he was selling them off because he made dupes. He sold copies of these things to people. So I was actually doing work for him. I was shilling for him. I didn't care. It's good. Great. Make more of these. The world needs more of this. And so then eventually I found a Super 8 version, and I got the one of the wartime ones, and I got the first, and I just watched that over and over. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I even did like flip books. I wanted to do like my sequel, or my own version of one called the Blitzenberg, with a big Zeppelin that's dropping bombs. It's like I yeah, I really love it. So I was born to work on Superman.
Amazing. Let's talk very quickly about the man behind you, Terry McGinnis.
Terry McGinnis. Yes.
There was a time I was calling Batman Beyond the best Spider-Man adaptation ever. What would you say to a statement like that?
You know, possibly, but I'd have to say we are all, obviously we're Marvel fans. We love Spider-Man as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily our intention, because we had an edict to have a teenage Batman and have him in school. And so there is no better model for that kind of thing than Spider-Man.
The
So
1960s Peter Parker.
yeah, so that was kind of like, but it wasn't like our intention to go, all right, now we're just going to do this, because we're like, no, you really have no choice, because that's kind of like, that's what the network wanted. They were like, okay, we want a teenage Batman. And and to the credit of Bruce and Alan and Paul, but really it was that meeting where, we're in the middle of Superman, and then they're like, okay, you know what, we got the rights back to Batman, we're going to do Batman, so you're going to stop doing Superman. Okay, here's Batman. And we're like, oh, all right, okay. So all right, fine. So then we switch gears and we start doing Batman again, but we're still not stopped with Superman. We get to finish off some episodes. So we're doing them both at the same time. It was killing us, but we were having fun. Um, and then, at some point we thought we were doing well. The network goes, yeah, we're trying to skew everything for teenagers, children. So we want a teenage Batman.
Did they
Well,
realize that teenagers love Batman to begin with?
Well, yeah, you have to kind of go back in time to the people that were in charge, Kids WB and Warner Brothers in general. That network was being skewed to like everything was supposed to be like the young people, teenagers, and they really thought that teenagers don't like seeing old. They don't like seeing, they want to see themselves reflected on a show. So that was their mentality all the time. And there weren't really comic book people. They didn't really understand the appeal of this stuff. They didn't get it. So you're like, okay, yes, what do you do? And you walk away, right? You forget, no, we're not going to do that. What are you're nuts? But Bruce, it's like, wait, we can't. Oh, and because of what they wanted to do, like, let's do a pre-Batman. Let's do a show about Bruce Wayne going around the world Batman. And we're like, as a cartoon?
No.
That doesn't make any sense. And ironically, that's what Gotham is, and they did a show out of that, but that makes sense in live action, but it doesn't make sense in cartoon. It would be like, why would all you'd want is to see Batman. You'd want to see Batman. It's just frustrating that he's not there yet. That doesn't work as a cartoon. But
was the idea of just focusing on somebody like Robin or Nightwing off the table, or
apparently initially that was they really wanted Batman because the brand of Batman, brand is Batman.
Okay.
Because we were originally going to spin off Catwoman and Robin early on, back when we were still on Fox, and that didn't happen. But that was the idea, to spin them off into their own show. But that, but but in this case, it was that, and Bruce just said, "Wait, what if we just do it in the future? What if it's a different Batman? What if it's not Bruce Wayne? What if we do it in the future? We do a future show." And then it was just like he's just off the top
Boom.
of his head, boom, and then he draws a Bruce Wayne. And what if this Bruce Wayne is still alive, and his mentor, and he's this cranky, crabby old guy, and he drew this horrifying, like, got a big scar and one wide-eyed. It's like this Boris Karloff looking Bruce Wayne, and we were just like, yes, that's awesome. And and so then he comes back from this meeting, and we're all kind of like, "Hi." And then he's like, and then there's Bruce Wayne, and he looks like this, and we went, yes, yes, we can do this. This can be cool. And Glenn Murakami immediately like, no, this is going to be great. And then he just like started doing backgrounds and coming up with like this scheme, like this sort of Blade Runner world and just visualizing what this place was going to look like. And
Amazing.
we all just got on board, and it was pretty cool. It was pretty amazing.
All it takes is that one spark to get everybody
All it
going.
takes is that one spark, just the right drawing. Now, ironically, the guys in charge of Warner's were like, "No, he can't be that ugly. What are you, nuts?" No, but they pulled back, and he still was pretty cool. He was a awesome Bruce.
What were the challenges of going into Justice League? Because I've heard that there were challenges in that first season.
Yeah, lots of challenges. There's a scale issue with the stories that have to be big, and set pieces, action of so many different powers, so many different characters. Crowd scenes are a pain. That's the beauty of Batman, was that you're dealing with one or two characters, Batman and Robin.
Abandoned alleys, no people.
No people. You're dealing with the character and villains interacting. There are no crowd scenes to actually have to interact with, unless it's a party or whatever. But it's like one little scene. It's not like a set piece, But having 7 characters that have to interact all the time, and it just logistically, it's such a, and the stories have to work so that all their powers don't cancel each other out. It was a very tough thing to work out, figure out. Because Superman, all you need is, the Flash and Superman, and they could take out everything. You don't really need everybody else. Batman for ideas and his brain, and Superman and the Flash could just handle everything else with the super speed. And it's like, really, it's like, it's tough to kind of justify having everybody. So you have to make, to make that make sense, and to give it. But the funny thing is, okay, as hard as that is, when Bruce was originally given Superman to do, Ruby Spears had just done a Superman. We had Lois and Clark was coming on. He just kind of like, there's no fresh way to do this. We can't do a new. Let's just have Superman and the Justice League. And so we, he pitched this idea of having like a limited, and we didn't have Batman at the time because he was still at Fox, so it was like everybody else. But it's like, and he just had this pared down version of the Justice League that he was thinking of, like, and then he could rotate the characters. It wouldn't be all of them, and Warner Brothers and DC both were like, "What are you, out of your mind?" No, he has to have his own show that he's in charge of, that he starts, and later on down the line, when we build that universe up, then you can do that. But we can't just start that out the gate. We're not going to just like shoot everything,
That's what Marvel did with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You guys did that first.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
And that was to Warner's credit. They had, it was.
Also,
cool.
Going back to Superman a little bit, you guys had the best version of Lois Lane.
I think so. And I mean, I do love the look of the Fleischer one. I think that that's like the quintessential Lois. Beautiful design, you know. But Dana Delaney is the best. She was phenomenal. She's so strong, so powerful. And what's great about her too is that there's something about her, even though we didn't have that sort of 40s sensibility on the show, her attitude feels very 40s.
Yeah.
She has this sort of Rosalind Russell strength.
She's
She's
the
like,
one that grounds the show in the time it's in.
yes, yes.
Um,
And what's yeah, and we didn't have to go with the romance, she wasn't always pining after Superman. She was really, we didn't have to deal with that, which was done so well in the feature. It's like we didn't have to go there. We just kind of like let that sort of like percolate and
yeah.
and build until the end of the series.
Till you get to the end.
Until we
I,
get
I
to the end.
I think that it's better than the Fleischer Lois because while they are equally good reporters and equally brave and equally go-getters, your Lois Lane is not an idiot.
Yes,
The Fleischer
yes.
Lois Lane is kind of
A little too reckless, perhaps. Yeah.
I've heard it
And
said that she has the instincts of a toddler.
yeah, yeah, perhaps, perhaps. Um, and she is really hostile towards Clark. There was that thing in the old days where the Phyllis Coates Lois. I love. She's beautiful. She's great. She's strong. She's like a tough broad. I love her, but she's so mean to Clark. As a child, when I was 5, watching her, oh, she's so mean. What a mean Lois. Like I thought Noel Neal was nicer, but then later on, growing up watching the shows, I'm like, oh, that first season is great. She's tough. But there was a thing that Dana had the strength, intelligence, strength, and yet she managed to maintain uh, a decency. She was competitive with Clark, but she wasn't mean to him. She was just occasionally she was a little cynical and a little dismissive, but she was
Yeah,
never really like an awful person, which is important because Lois can't be unlikable. You know, you have
absolutely.
to have her. If she's too competitive and too kind of like then she's not as likable. And competition isn't bad. It's just she has to kind of be nice.
Yeah, friendly
So
competition.
friendly competition.
In the first season of Justice League, it is pretty evident that you guys, uh, I wouldn't say powered down, but you definitely tried to show a more vulnerable Superman who tried to get,
Yes.
he
Yes.
gets knocked down quite a bit in
Right. Right.
the first season.
Yes.
Was that that
Is
was
that
a
a
conscious
question?
decision? Yeah, was that a conscious decision?
um, it is. How can I put it? It wasn't unconscious. Um, Perhaps. It's just the way things worked out, but because you're dealing with um, again, how do you deal with a group of heroes that all have powers? You want everybody to shine, so we have to kind of like knock him down as much as possible to let other people shine. So yes, ultimately yes, it was a conscious decision, and I'll say in one set, and I was heartbroken, and Bruce knew it because I came up with the smear effects when Superman moves fast, all that stuff. That I was so proud of the timing for that. I thought it was so I was like that was my mark on Superman was his little zippy smears when he'd come in and a bullet would bounce off his chest. It was like, and Bruce was like, "Damn, sorry, but we can't. We're gonna why?" And it's like, well, we have the Flash, and if Superman can do what the Flash can do, then we're we're diminishing. It's all he's got is super speed, and we want to showcase a different effect for that. So we can't have them have competing super speed effects, and so you know, yeah, he was super fast, and we occasionally showed it, but we kept it to a minimum because we wanted to make sure that the Flash shown, as the fast guy. So in that case, yeah, we depowered Superman to make another character shine.
Before I get to the logical extension of that particular question, I just want to ask about a few episodes in season one that I feel like I feel like you directed these, and I feel like it really probably tickled the comic book part of your brain. The Brave and the Bold. I know you're a Neil Adams fan. Pairing up Green Lantern and the Flash.
Yep, yep. That
Yeah,
was that was fun. That was really
and then bringing
um,
in Gorilla City too.
that was amazing. That was amazing. That was so much. Um, yeah, yeah. It was so cool because it's like, Solivar, uh, chasing down Grodd, all that stuff that was in the origin of Grodd, his first stories. That was, that was there. It was really cool. Um, and it's just like, um, the, the actors are so much fun and they bring so much. Michael Rosenbaum is so funny at a record that it was a joy to work with him. And I, and Phil Lamar as Green Lantern, he's also, I mean, come on, he's a comedian.
Yeah.
He was on Mad TV. Again, very funny. So they knew exactly how to play off of each other, and it was a blast. It was a blast. Those episodes. Um, and no, and it was neat because, boy, that was the one, wasn't it? Let me, the Gorilla Grodd episode was the one where Wonder Woman saves
I was
the
gonna
city.
say, yeah, Wonder
Yeah,
Woman saves the city and she crashes and into a pile of rubble, and Batman is overly worried about her.
yeah. He's concerned.
He's very concerned.
Very concerned.
Was that, see, that's the question. Was that planned, or did you
No,
know that was gonna go somewhere?
no. And I'll tell you, I've mentioned it in before, and I was so happy that, because Susan Eisenberg didn't know this, but yeah, I'm kind of responsible. And because what happened was the scene was working okay, but it needed a punctuation, it needed something else. So the way that Bruce would go over a board, like you'd be there with the board artist, and it was Joaquin Dos Santos, right?
Mhm.
Genius, brilliant board artist. It was, he's beginning, but it's still really great. And so we were like going over this stuff, and actually, I think Adam Van Wyck had done that part of it, but still, uh, very brilliant, brilliant board artist. But it just needed a little extra something. And Bruce just like came up with this idea. Wait, I got this idea. And he started drawing these on post-it. He would just draw, really loose, just these wonderful little loose drawings. And he's like, okay, and then Batman's like, and then Wonder Woman like comes out, and which was in the board already, but not this part. And then she's like, she sees his smoldering burnt love. She notices that he's the one who rescues, and gives him a kiss on the cheek. And he covers up, and he covers up his hands first, and then she gives him, and and then Bruce looked at it and went, nah, that's too much. And I was like, no, Bruce, we got to do that. That's great. That's so awesome. That's exactly what it needs. And he's like, you think so? Yes, yes, I know so. This has to stay. And so that was the one time I've ever done that with Bruce, where he second guesses himself, because he never does. He usually has an idea. He's like, this is what it's going to be. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. It's this. But he never waffles. He's like, this is what it is. I know what it is. It's this. Um, and for him to actually kind of go, nah, it's too much. No, so, so I feel like I rescued that. I didn't do it, but I rescued it, because it might have ended up in the trash bin if Bruce had like decided not to do it.
That's awesome. We'll get back to Wonder Bat in a little bit.
Yes. So yes,
Um,
but what do you think? We had not planned it. It was that moment, and we thought, gee, do you think people will think? And we're like, yeah, whatever. Go, sure, whatever. And then people did, and then we were like, all right, let's lean into it.
you ended up directing a lot of the Wonder Bat related episodes too.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know. This little piggy was a blast. That was really, really fun. Um, but yeah, yeah. I
I know some people who hate it because they're like, "What did you guys do to Batman?" And I'm like, It's funny."
It's funny. It's funny and it's fun. And that's the kind of thing that you do with the group. You have an ensemble and you have characters, and it's also, they don't really have a chance. She complains about it. He's too busy and
Yeah,
so, they don't really have the relationship that is sort of like hanging in front of them, and it doesn't lead anywhere like like the end of Superman, it doesn't
yeah,
really, they get a fake kiss during the Thanagarian
they
invasion,
do.
but
Another couple of episodes in season one, Legends. I feel like
that
that was
was
right up your wheelhouse.
oh, absolutely. I was born for that episode. Um, and it's one of those things where again, I'm like the biggest Justice Society fan. I so that was what it was originally set to be, and of course, because of the nature of the show, they die. Spoiler alert. Um, and DC was like, "Well, we love, but you're not." Like, what? Well, we can't have the only appearance in the DC animated universe of the Justice Society and say that they're dead. We're not gonna. That's just not. We're not gonna let that stand. You know. And so we're like, oh, man. And then, but then we're all really like both James Tucker and I were like, I don't want to anyway. So we'll save that for some other time. But what do we do? And they were like, we don't want you to kill the show. Why don't you do an Alan Moore? Why don't we just create ciphers for these characters like he did with Charles? And we're like, that's great. So, but the problem is it's easier said than done because like the clearance for all the names was grueling and we had very little time. The script was written, it was getting ready, and we didn't have names for the characters. So it was just like, legal was just going, it was tough. And DC was actually being very finicky about it because we couldn't have a Scarlet Speedster because it's like, no, because that's the Flash's nickname. You couldn't have, the Emerald Avenger or whatever, what anybody's like their, Cape Crusader, you
Yeah,
couldn't, we couldn't get away with any of the names that they refer to the characters to. So it's like, it had to come up with new stuff. And it's like, so the gold, the what is it, the Green Guardian? We couldn't call that because there was one, or they'd called him that at some point. So we like guardsman. What's a guardsman? All right, well,
well, we're running
sure,
with it.
that's it, that's it. And we lucked out because apparently the streak was clear. So we're like, wow, I didn't think that was clear. But and the Catman was an issue
Yeah,
because
there was
there
a Catman.
was a Catman comic, but fortunately, DC had one too. He was a villain,
Yeah,
but they had, and they're going like, and so when we see the tombstones, that's the character. So there's no, this is our guy. It's a different universe version, hero in this world, but that's the name that we're going with so that legally we can say that it's not this other guy from the 40s. It's probably in public domain, but we don't know. Um, so,
spoiler to everyone, it's not that they die,
oh yeah,
it's
yeah,
that they're already dead.
they're already, yeah. And you know that the gimmick for that episode, the inspiration for the what that episode is, right? The kid is Roy Thomas. He's Ray Thompson,
Yeah,
right? And so that's kind of a given, right? But so it's kind of a little love letter to comic book fandom from the old days, kind of in that way. But also there was a scene in the Kree Skrull War when Rick Jones like has the supreme intelligence and then the all winter squad comes out of his head and
yeah,
saves the day.
all
And
the
that's
40s
essentially
guys.
all the 40s guys. So that was kind of like the impetus for like, oh, this would be cool if something like this, right? Turns out that idea that Roy Thomas wrote in a Marvel comic was actually given to him by Gardner Fox.
Oh,
And that was his way. He had actually suggested it as a way of bringing the Justice Society back. And they went with Gardner Fox also came up with the multiple universes and all that stuff, and
Yeah.
Earth 2 and all that stuff. But initially, that was his way of doing it. And that was in a letter to Roy Thomas. And so we're like, wait, we had already dedicated the Gardner Fox because he brought the characters back. But to think that he actually came up with the idea, we didn't know that.
Oh, I was gonna ask. That was my next question. When did the dedication to Gardner Fox come in? After you knew this or before you knew this?
No, before we didn't know this until after it aired.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yes. It's really cool.
That's very cool.
I was reading it in an Alter Ego magazine. I'm like, wait, what? The show had already hit the air. We're like, what? And so then I mentioned it to guys. Look what happened. This is so cool. Wait. We're like inspired by the thing that was inspiring the other guy that did the inspiration in the first place.
It's all full circle.
It's really cool.
But
you're doing something right when that happens.
Yeah.
That you're on the right groove when you're actually like, cool.
I know you love the Golden Age, and therefore there's one episode that I feel is even a little bit more Golden Agey than that, and it is the Savage Time.
Yes.
And I know you're a big Blackhawks fan, so how did it feel bringing the Blackhawks to life?
It was extraordinary. It was so great. I was so happy. I had brought in all the books. We made sure that the reference to the Blackhawk Island, all that stuff, and we're actually was that in that one. Oh yeah, it was. Of course. But we are like, there was even a song that we made sure, give the reference to inspire her for the song that they have, because the Blackhawks sang in all the comics. They're like, it was like, which they made fun of in Mad,
Yeah, of course.
The singing pilots, but we did a song that was kind of a tribute to that original song. I just, it was a dream come true for me. I've always loved it.
Do you think the Blackhawks are maybe a little bit lost to history, but they were much bigger back in the day, weren't they?
They were huge. And what's really funny is that we did the serial in the 50s. You ever see the trailer? It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
You see the trailer. They actually credit the artist, Reed Crandall. He didn't even come up with it, but he was the artist drawing it. But it's actually based on the comic drawn by Reed Crandall. That's amazing. That's amazing. A comic book artist gets full credit in a movie theater, and what? That's mind blowing. It's mind blowing.
It is, and it's just nobody ever talks about the Blackhawks anymore. But then you find out they have these serials. Will Eisner worked on them.
What? Yeah, and there's the thing too. I actually messed up a commentary because I didn't realize that there were issues with that, because he'd always been credited with creating Blackhawk, and it was his studio at the time. But I guess I didn't realize that Chuck Woodera for years had said, no, it wasn't Will. He wasn't even there. I did it. I came up with it. I wrote the own story. And so Will was like, I don't remember it that way, but you know what? And eventually he's like, look, I own the spirit. Fine. If you remember it this way, then fine. So forevermore now, Chuck gets credit for creating Blackhawk. And I didn't know that. So I'm like going, yeah, and I'm such an Eisner fan, and it's so cool that he, created, and they had to my whole track of that part got cut because it was like, oh, I didn't realize that there was and that's one of the things you can't talk about that kind of stuff, because you never know what the legalities, about who created what and all this stuff. It's I guess Man Bat now is being solely credited to Neil Adams, where it's always been Frank Robbins and Neil Adams. And Neil was like, you know what? Love Frank and all, but I was in the room. They were like They couldn't come up with an idea. I suggested, look, if I'm telling you, Marvel's going to do it. If you don't do it, somebody else is going to do Man Bat, and you should do it first. DC
Yeah.
should own this. And they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So that's his story for a while. That story, but Frank Robbins happened to write the story, but he's the one who suggested the idea in the room. So now he gets sole credit. That's how. I was actually kind of like, hey, what happened to Frank Robbins? Why doesn't he get? Well, that's Neil Adams' story about how it was created. I'm like, I don't I wouldn't imagine he has any reason to lie. He protected Siegel and Schuster.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I trust Neil. I trust him. I think
It's always interesting, not to go off on a tangent, but like
yeah,
Nightwing is credited to Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Um,
right.
but the Winter Soldier is not fully credited to Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting. He's still kind of
Yeah.
credited as Bucky, which is
Wow.
this is the same situation, isn't it?
It kind of is. It
So
is
it seems
tricky
like
how
it's
that done.
all coming down to the back legal end.
That's exactly. That's how and that's why you know officially you're never allowed to give a character's age, when they started, all that stuff. They don't like talking about that stuff. Dates and all that stuff, they're very tricky about that. That's why we were never allowed to say how old Bruce Wayne is
Oh, okay.
or
That
give a
makes
date.
sense.
That everything is sort of like nebulous. It's the future sometimes.
In 2002, after I went to college in 2002. I went to the States for college,
Mm-hmm.
and season 2 of Justice League was coming out, and I remember hanging out with my friends and watching Twilight, and we were so used to Superman getting knocked down. You directed Twilight, and you know how that fight goes with Darkseid. What happened in between seasons 1 and 2 that went from let's knock him down to, oh my god, he's kicking ass?
Well, what happened was um, Bruce said, "That's enough of that." As I believe he's credited, he wrote that, right?
Yeah,
That's Twilight, right?
that's Twilight.
And then the other thing, eventually, what happened, through the rest of the storyline is basically Dwayne McDuffie kind of came up with this theory for why, you know, the idea was that Superman, um, his big fear is losing control, so he's pulling back. But with Darkseid, there's no pulling back. He's the one character,
Mm.
him and Mongol, and when a character merits it, he'll let loose. He'll um because it's like, he's not a killer. Our Superman isn't a killer, but he knows that force has to be met with appropriate force, and he'll come close
And he's
when
the
it comes
only
to
one
someone.
with the appropriate force.
Exactly, exactly. So that's where the gloves come off, because it starts. Um, and just as in The Man Who Has Everything, he was angry,
Yeah.
but the gloves came off because it was mom. It was like
I remember the moment in Twilight that really got me was, so he beams up Darkseid's foot. He does his
yeah,
heat vision, and then he
yeah.
does a little kip up, and I'm like, wait, did Superman just do like one of those martial arts kip ups? That's awesome.
Yeah, Bruce Borden, that that all that fights.
Yeah,
That
that
was
was the second of two big
yeah,
Superman and
yeah,
Darkseid fights that
yeah,
you directed.
yeah. And again, it's like, I'm doing. I'm
I feel kind of bad that you didn't direct the last one.
it's just the luck of the draw. It's
Yeah.
whenever you get stuff, but it's okay. I got to do a epilogue, and that was
Yes,
technically our last episode
I've
until it got
heard.
renewed. So you know, and it was really cool the way it sort of bookended with the last line being
Being the first line
first.
of
That was the whole
Batman.
intention. It was like, And you know who understood that and got that right away? Kevin Conroy.
He
He saw
voiced it,
that.
right?
He voiced it. That's why he got the role of the pilot, because he voiced it initially.
It's awesome.
And so, you know, it was and he laughed when he saw that. He remembered that was his first line of the show.
Did you so going back to Twilight, did you guys know that you were now going to start playing off of the ending of Superman? Because if you get to from the end of Superman and Legacy had just happened, he just been controlled by Darkseid, and the first episode of Justice League is the world is implicitly trusting him again. But then you get to Twilight, and then
There's a line. There's a line he talks about trying to rebuild. So
oh,
so there is that, and that's kind of like the implication of the need for more heroes to help in Justice League forming, not
hmm.
just the invasion, but just this idea of building. So he's still working on it when the show begins. So there's an implication. I wish we'd leaned harder on it, but we were still like continuity issues. We weren't quite, we were never like sticklers for continuity until the second season of Justice League, and that's when suddenly like everything had to be like, because we had redesigned Superman to some degree, and we weren't allowed to use Batman. So there was this idea that yes, Ma Kent mentions that nut up Gotham, but we couldn't mention him by name because Fox
Hmm.
still ran the show. So then when we brought it into, folded it in, we're still like not sure whether or not, when we redesigned it, whether or not those episodes were technically like still folded in, if it was a different world, or why you said a new costume or all that stuff. So continuity was like not like the first thing in our mind
Yeah.
when we were doing these shows. And then but except for like aspects of Superman, we were doing like a serial with Darkseid. Those things, but they weren't like lined up. It was just like a broad arching, like then we're going to bring this character in, then we're going to do, and we did that with Batman to some degree, but with Two Face, like we were going to milk him more, and then have Harvey Dent become. But Alan Burnett came up with too good a story too soon, so that just we had to do it. So when Justice League came along, we kind of like, okay, second season, we're like, let's lean into the continuity. Let's try to like make things make some kind of sense. And Bruce and James and Dwayne all wrap their heads around that world, and Rich also, they're just like, let's find ways to like pull in things from the old series, bounce back off old.
I
So
feel I feel like watching Superman interact with Darkseid really highlights Superman for the rest of the series because it's somebody told me this once when I was watching this with them. They said everybody thinks Superman is a Boy Scout. He's not a Boy Scout, he's just controlled. He's in
mhm.
control of his emotions,
Right, right,
which feels like a more, I don't want to say the word mature, but
yes.
but
But what's really funny is then, and some people had issues with this episode, but I thought it worked great with Flash, where Lex is pushing Superman's button, and he's kind of poking him a lot, and he loses it. He loses control, and of course, it was about really having Captain fight. We really wanted Super Duper Man, you know.
yeah.
Let's justify this, and it wasn't like they're going to fight over Lois or anything like that. Let's make it something like Lex is behind the scenes manipulating Superman, and and like a dope, he he succumbs, he falls for it, uh, and then after that, because we've dealt with like the Justice Lords and we've seen a Superman that's killed Lex in another universe, that we know how far he can go, and so it then he worries, and he really kind of pulls back, and he's really kind of, that's his big fear. um that was one of the things Dwayne said. His big fear is losing control. It's not kryptonite. His weakness is that fear of losing control. He lives in a world of paper. He lives in a world of, where everyone is, and he has to just gent-
He just has to make sure he doesn't lose control. Yeah. Speaking of A Better World, this was I had already loved the show before A Better World, but I feel like A Better World is when the show goes from like good to great.
exactly, exactly.
You
'Cause,
guys
I mean,
feel
I loved the Aquaman episode. I loved a lot of stuff in the first season. I thought we really like did some wonderful things, but that was profound because you're dealing with themes of good and evil that we hadn't really reflected on, and the idea of, because a lot of people would be perfectly happy with Justice Lord being in control. We can see that they don't mind the idea of a ruling iron fist as long as there's security. And we're like, yeah, really, really the world, really? And is that really, And that was kind of our take on that. It was really cool, and it was really that's the idea that the crime syndicate, Bruce just had an issue with that. The idea of like a parallel universe, good is bad, bad is good. Just didn't, it's one thing in Star Trek where they're pirates, where the Federation is sort of like wild and it's unfocused, and it's not just like good is bad and bad is good. It's chaos. But this is like different, so that he didn't want to do that show. He didn't want to do the crime syndicate. He just want to like, what if we do an episode where they're literally our characters, but they've just gone and they've they've taken that step and they're now in charge of the world because they can.
Yeah. I remember the exact moment that I thought, holy crap, this show is so good was it's that scene in the Batcave where Batman is talking to Batman. And every time one Batman says one thing, it's the other Batman on the screen. It was amazing.
Wasn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
That was brilliant. I wish I could claim credit for that. I believe it was like Bruce had suggested it, and Brett Blevins boarded it, but it wasn't playing exactly right. So we had to finesse that board carefully to make sure that the correct Batman never spoke on screen until the very end when he comes out of the shadows.
Yeah.
He says, he's like, "I'm in. You win."
You win.
And uh, and it was a very tricky thing to stage. It was very tricky. Brett did a great job.
But
He did one,
it
but it
landed
was it
super
was
well.
really did. It really. I remember like, wow, wow. It's funny too because there are some of those things where those moments where it's like the wedding of Vandal Savage and Princess Audrey was like
Yeah.
one of those things with the contrast of Wonder Woman smashing tanks and all this stuff with the wedding that was really a cool bit
Yeah.
too.
Wonder Woman having a fun night out. That
Yeah,
was a pretty fun episode.
that was. What?
It was speaking of that, you were talking earlier about how difficult it was to logistically get all seven on the screen all at
Mhm.
once. The last fight scene in Secret Society, that's when I felt like the choreography was like, wait, this is this show is really like, stepping up and getting it. And
It was, and I have to, you know, all props to the board artist, Adam Van Wyck, like brilliant, brilliant, and there are so many scenes that were like, and the thing is, he overboards so much, adds so much that it makes it really hard because you have to cut things out for time and you have to figure out the logistics of like, okay, this is going on here, but then he has the camera pans and something else is going on over here, and then or they go through the scene and they hook up to this, and it's all just like this careful dance of things going on, and it was so hard to keep that straight. Um, it was it was he did a phenomenal job.
these are all you too. These are all
Yeah,
episodes you directed.
yeah, yeah. I know. I got
And
so lucky.
the with Secret Society, the thing that I mean, I think I was 20, and I watched the ending of that and they were like, well, we said a lot of things. What do we do? Like, oh, we say sorry and we move on. And that's how the episode ends. And to me,
Yep.
that was like so profound. It's like,
Yep.
well, yeah, that's what happens. What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? Exactly. It's like, yeah, we weren't all mind controlled. Those were our actual thoughts. It's it's like it's like, yeah, we were saying things that we actually, we
Actually
came up
meant
with
it.
we actually meant it. It was cool.
To me, it was a lesson in accountability and responsibility.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, and speaking of Jon Stewart, you also directed the second part of Wild Cards. That's when
yeah.
Jon Stewart and Hawkgirl finally kiss.
That's right.
You do the whole removal of the
Okay, you know what? That I again, it's funny because all these things I get to get credit for because my name's up above, but it's like Dark Side fighting Superman. That Bruce boarded that. That kiss, Bruce saved himself. He drew that. So it's like these are Bruce moments, really. I have to like credit where credit is due. I get my name on the credits, so it's like I'm up a front. I'm very lucky that way. But it is one of those things.
but that was a pivotal moment too. I think that
It
was
really
the
was.
yeah.
It really was. It was gorgeous. Um, and and
Did you know it was going to be pivotal when you were making it?
I was hoping it was. I think we were planning on it. That was the idea. And what's really funny too is that, how can I put this? The fact that there was so much restraint that it was a kid show, and yet um, we never seen Hawkgirl without her mask, her helmet, and the fact that she is removing things, he's it it was as close to a metaphor for disrobing and for intimacy um, as you could get on a kid show,
Mm-hmm.
and it was great because I think it was sexier and and more profound because it was about emotion, feeling, and real emotions between characters, and it wasn't dirty. There's nothing about it that was like lurid or salacious, but yet that motion of the and her exposing herself vulnerable to him, it just had so much meaning, and I love that. I love that because I don't think we could ever get there later on with other stuff where it's like, they're just being intimate. So what? Oh yeah, we've seen that a million times in live action. Who cares?
Yeah.
You know, I don't. But this was different because it was like it just feels more connecting.
Some shots on
I
this
loved it.
some shots on the show are really beautiful. Like going back to the Savage Time, there's that maybe 5-second clip of the Blackhawk, Superman, and Hawkgirl
Yeah,
flying, and then they slant down.
yeah,
And especially after you guys did Wild Cards, you finally have them kiss. You built up to it for like 2 seasons,
yeah,
and you broke all our hearts uh, with
yeah,
Starcrossed. But
yeah,
the ending of Starcrossed as she's flying away, and
yes.
John is looking at her. That's just a beautiful shot.
It is a beautiful. It was beautiful, and it's funny too because it also reflects the sunset thing in the title sequence with the you know. So
Yeah.
there's this iconic hawk girl flying thing that is sort of reflected in that that ending. Neat. Um, what was funny about that, and what other videos that sort of made play on this thing, the whole idea of us faking everybody out with Hawk Girl's backstory.
You did
You
not.
know
You
what?
did not fake us out. You did it wasn't like I think as early as Twilight, the Martian Manhunter flat out says he cannot get into her mind. No, wait,
Yeah.
as
Yes.
it's the one with Doctor Destiny. He says we cannot get into her mind.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
was
There were
always
clues.
up. Something
There
was
were
always
clues.
up, right?
There
Yeah.
was something always up. Yes. Um, and it was cool, but the funny thing was Maria didn't know. We
She
didn't
didn't
tell
know.
anybody. She didn't know. No, nobody knew. Nobody knew. It had been a suggestion from DC, from Paul Evans, that somebody be a traitor. He's like, we want to, I think it'll mix things up. And when we go through all the candidates, all the characters, she was the only one that made sense.
Yeah.
So we kind of went, okay, let's do this, but we'll put a pin in it, save it for later.
Amazing.
And that's like when the pin was pulled. And there were two things that DC had requested that the original script, it was Hawkman, and we couldn't have Hawkman be, he couldn't be, and the other thing was he couldn't be married to Hawkgirl because that would have made the relationship with Green Lantern fair, and she can like be in charge of and have a secret, be a part of an invasion of the Earth, but she cannot have adultery. She cannot commit adultery. This is a kid show, and standard that we can't cross.
War and violence is okay.
War and violence is fine. She can be a traitor to the entire planet, but she cannot be a traitor to her husband. So we made them be engaged instead of be married.
And he wasn't Hawkman. He was Frotalic.
Hawkman, Frotalic. We made a character. So, and those are the things.
Okay. Understood. I told you I was watching this in college with all my friends, and everyone's favorite character was Hawkgirl.
She's phenomenal.
She's amazing.
And by the way, when she got the script, she cried. She was angry, and she was upset because she thought we were writing her out of the show, and we had to convince her that not only is she not, and we're going to bring her back, but look at what you get to do. Look at this stuff. It's like you get to act. And then she went, okay. And she got into it totally. But she felt like initially, like she felt betrayed. We had betrayed her. I'm like, somehow, you don't like me. We're like, no, we did this for you because we love you, because you're so good. And so we even like, even before like Shaira was brought back, there were other characters of Justice League Unlimited that we brought back, we had her voice, was Fire, she did a Brazilian accent for that. That was adorable. And so we had her on other shows. We brought her back, like we love working with her. She's so talented.
With when you moved into Justice League Unlimited, I mean, you were talking earlier about how difficult it was to coordinate 7 characters. And now here you are with like 50.
Yeah.
The first one that you directed was For the Man Who Has Everything.
Yep.
I personally think it's better than the comic. I'll say that for the record right now. How did it feel adapting Alan Moore's classic?
It felt well, it felt great, but it was also like one of those things where it felt privileged. Let me put it that way, because these things don't come easy, and it would have been very easy to say no. And DC already had a very precarious relationship with him for a number of reasons. So it was one of those things where the fact that Bruce had a relationship and worked was like he personally gave his okay. But it is one of those things where it's an honor, because it was a beautiful story. It was so well done. And I think everybody knocked it out of the park. And again, Bruce wanted to board the Bruce Wayne flashback.
What I thought made it better than the comic was because the premise is that you get your heart's desire, but then his heart's desire in the comic feels like it wouldn't really be his heart's desire. Like Lois isn't in it, Jor-El is a nutball, and then you guys just, what you did actually felt like something he would wish for.
Exactly. And it's like the melding of Lois and Lana. It's Loana. His world is still there. He's still a farm boy.
Yeah.
But on Krypton, So it's like the melding of Smallville and Metropolis and Krypton all into one thing. And he as a child,
Yeah.
all the things that he wants. Uh,
You did this little piggy, which we've talked about. I love that
yes.
you basically you directed the episode with where the whole thing started, and you directed the episode where it basically gets resolved,
Yes. Yes.
and it was funny as hell.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Buona Beast, for crying out loud. We got to do Buona Beast,
Buona
which was
Beast.
Buona Beast is like the most obscure DC showcase character that was like kind of I know just a questionable character. He's just kind of goofy. And we didn't really focus on his powers, which are really weird, where he takes animals and melts them together,
Yeah.
which they did in Brave and Bold. So, hats off to James Tucker for actually like doing the character correctly.
Yeah.
But our version was really funny. He was hilarious. Um,
He
yeah,
was Sylvester Stallone.
yes, yes, it was awesome.
What
Uh,
what an
oh, and I also
amazing
got,
stroke of genius.
I know it really was. It really was brilliant. And then the idea of Batman singing was one of those things where I've heard pushback from people who are like, Batman, I turn off the show. I'm not watching it again because
Yeah.
your Batman sings. Like, okay,
Yeah, that's what
it's
I
your choice.
was telling you earlier. I saw some people hate on that episode because they were like, "What did you do, Batman? Batman doesn't sing." I was like, "Batman can do whatever Batman wants to do."
Batman, that is exactly. They learned to sing. However, ironically, I do have a comic from the 40s. My very first Batman comic that I got when I was a child. I mean, I had comics, but somebody gave me a Golden Age comic. Um, a John G. Fantuccio, who was a fan artist and comic collector who traded comics with my brother. He found this thing it was this piece of trash that had like barely a spine, and it was essentially worthless. But he had it in a grocery bag thing, and he's like, "Here, give this to your brother. He'll like it." And I poured through this, and there's a story where Batman and Robin join an opera, um, and they're terrible. They can't
Yeah.
sing.
Tell me about Booster Gold.
you know, Here's the thing. I wasn't as familiar. I mean, I knew the Justice League stories with him in there and he and Blue Beetle. I remember that stuff, the Giffen stuff. I did like them, but I wasn't as into Booster Gold as a comic character until that episode, until I kind of got into his head, and it was one of those things where it made the character for me. And now I really love him. I think he's awesome.
Yeah.
But that was a fun where you're just dealing with the side story that is cataclysmic that nobody even knows about because something big is going on. And, that was really fun. And
Yeah.
that was the episode where we actually referenced Plastic Man, even though I always wanted to do Plastic Man.
You
And it
couldn't
never
use
showed up.
Plastic Man, right?
Now they were trying to get his own cartoon.
Oh,
And rights were
okay.
tied up.
That's too
So
bad.
we weren't allowed, we could reference him, but we couldn't use it.
Yeah.
So
That was such a great episode though, because I mean, it still drives some fans nuts because they're going, why did they show this instead of the big fight with Mordru? I was like, did you miss the point of the episode?
yeah, that's the point.
Over your
I
head.
know, I
Uh,
know.
you and then from there you did all of these kind of went into the whole Cadmus storyline, which I thought
Yes.
was amazing. I'm a huge Captain Marvel fan.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
and
Who did that? I can't see it from here. It's a
it's
very
a
small.
super quick convention sketch by George Perez.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um,
Awesome.
yeah, a friend of mine got it for me in Toronto, and
See, I did a thing where even in Batgirl Returns, there was a chemist character, and I decided he should be Dr. Savannah. So I drew. I like this is the design. I drew it for the character designer, and they yeah, he was Dr. Savannah. He's in a lab coat, and that was like, we never say it's him, but it's yeah, that was my love of that character and those comics. And then Darwyn Cooke put Billy Batson in a crowd scene in a
in
Superman
in
episode.
Superman, and the one with
Obsession.
yeah, in
Yeah,
Obsession, the first
Toyman.
one
Yeah,
with Lana
yeah, yeah.
in it. Yeah,
It was pretty cool.
you
That
guys are
was
clearly big fans of Captain Marvel, but you only had
uh,
him the once.
yes, and that was an edict.
Yeah,
We weren't allowed to use him more than, and that was kind of sad. But that's why there was talk about having him in crowd scenes and stuff, like with um, there was that one alien invasion Darkheart, and there was like everybody who's anybody was in that episode. That was the one where we showcased almost everybody, and um, we couldn't do Captain Marvel. Bruce didn't want to take a chance. He said once, "We're not going to
that's
waste it on a cameo. We're going to do an episode."
yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah,
That's too bad.
yeah.
You guys are clearly big Captain Marvel fans. I love it.
I certainly am. I mean, you know, I have to say though, James Tucker nailed it on
In
Brave and the
Brave and the
Bold.
Bold,
That was the best. That was the best.
I like to
I
say that Brave and the Bold was not uh was a parody of everybody else except Captain Marvel. That's how he actually is.
yeah, I I was so impressed. I was so impressed with that because they did the Black Adam so well, and then they did the Savannah getting the powers. Oh, it was brilliant. It was so brilliant. I was there's so many episodes in that because I love comics so much in that era that James really nailed it. Series. It was
That
as a
Cap
fan, I just dug it.
that Captain Marvel episode you did, you had a whole like 1 minute sequence where he's flying and there's theme music and he says Shazam.
Yep.
Was that kind of maybe a subtle hint that maybe you'd wanted him to get his own show or
Oh, without a doubt, that was what that was. I actually I boarded that sequence, that flying sequence and stuff, and him changing back, uh, because I love the movie serial. As a kid, I had the movie serial on Super 8, and I watched it over and over before I even saw the comics. And then I saw the one page in the Pfeiffer book, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love the
amazing?
character. And then eventually DC came up with the character, and I saw the reprints. I just loved it. The funny thing is, by the way, backstory in this: my brother is a collector of comics, and he had an early he had a Captain Marvel comic. So I'd actually, and what he said was, which was it stayed with me forever. I was 6 and I believed it. Look how old this comic is. This was drawn before they even knew how to draw eyes. They're just drawing dots for eyes. They don't even know. They don't even know how to draw eyes. and
Dots
I
for eyes and sometimes
squint. Yeah,
lines. Yeah.
yeah. And I believed it. I thought, oh my God, look how primitive. They don't even know how to draw.
That happened to me too. My older brother would tell me like what good art was
Yes.
to the point where I thought that Sienkiewicz couldn't draw for a while. Bill
Oh my
Sienkiewicz.
gosh.
I'm like,
Oh my goodness.
when what world was I living in that Bill
Oh,
Sienkiewicz couldn't
I
draw?
know. Well, I felt that way about Frank Robbins when I was a kid. I did
Mhm.
not like Frank Robbins. I didn't understand, the appeal. I didn't get it. And then I grew up, and then I realized what a genius. And those shadow comics that I vilified as a child, I realized are very interesting. I don't like them more than the Kalutas. I don't, but they're alongside them. I like
Uh-huh.
them, and I love his Batman stuff now. And seeing his original art changed me. Seeing the
Yeah.
brush line and the ink, and just you realize what a master he was. But I didn't get it.
Do you want to say some words about the Cadmus storyline?
The
Because that
Catfish
was
story,
amazing.
that was a gift. That was, when I believe I believe that Dwayne McDuffie wrote all of those major storylines for the
Yeah.
Cadmus arc, and that was like we were so blessed to have Dwayne on the show. It was a joy to work with him. And we became closer friends later when he worked on Ben 10 with him. And I actually pitched something at Disney with him, like in between Justice League and Ben 10. So I worked with him quite a bit. I did his first script that he ever wrote for Static Shock,
Yeah.
and I directed his last uh, um, TV thing, Ben 10. So his first and last scripts, I actually,
How did you feel when Dwayne?
it was
Mm,
hard. It was hard. It was such a shock. We
Yeah.
really, because when I was on the pilot for the thing we were working on at Disney, he had his first surgery, and it was in between, like it hadn't been, they didn't okay it, and we were like trying to figure out what's happening. He was recuperating, and then Ben had that. So we really thought all of his issues were taken care of. I didn't really expect, we didn't know about hospital.
That's too bad. Yeah, he was what a loss, right?
And and yes, so yes, the Cadmus arc, I just can't, I feel inextricably, it's tied to him, you know. Um,
Absolutely. And you also did the balance, which was that was a heartbreaker as well.
the
You
balance. That was, remind me again,
the
that was the
balance is
Wonder Woman.
when you,
No, wait.
if I'm remember now I got to look it up because now I'm not sure, but I think it's the
Okay.
one with Hawkgirl killing Solomon Grundy.
Okay. No, that wasn't me.
The balance is oh wait, no, it is Wonder Woman and Hawkgirl. I knew it was
That was
Hawkgirl.
Wonder Woman. That was Wonder Woman Hot Cold. That
Yeah.
was fun because that was we Hermes in that, which was kind of funny. That was our mythological episode, and that was really uh, that was cool because the earlier one where we saw Hades for the first time, and we had like our Ray Harryhausen tribute episode was like the early Wonder Woman episode, and this was our our follow up to that where it was really cool. That was really fun,
Yeah.
and the fact that even though we never actually state who voted who, like
It's kind of obvious who did.
it's, and
Uh,
yeah,
Superman, the Flash, Superman and the Flash, and wait, hold on. Batman and Wonder Woman voted against. The Flash and Martian Manhunter voted for, and Superman broke the tie.
that's
Yeah.
wait. What about Green Lantern? Who did he vote? What did he? How did he vote?
Didn't he recuse himself because of
Yeah,
a conflict of interest?
I believe so. I believe.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
that
I think
I
that's
thought that was pretty interesting that Batman and Wonder Woman would vote against. Like I feel like in earlier days of animation, like let's say they did it in a previous cartoon,
right.
there would have been an edict that said, well, no, they can say why they're against, but ultimately they have to vote for because, the power of friendship and all that.
Exactly.
But even with the balance, you made it clear. I thought it was interesting because the two female characters on the show do not get along,
Right.
and they don't make a secret about how they don't get along, and they're
No.
not even.
No. No. And it's interesting because there's like this notion of Wonder Woman being like this warrior, like Amazon thing, but ultimately she's a princess, and ultimately and she's a fish out of water, and there's something about her that doesn't, she's not as aggressive as a Thanagarian. you
Yeah.
know Hawk Girl is, a predator, and she's, you know and that's a she's a different character. She's a completely different person, and she is like punch first, ask questions later kind of mentality, and and so that contrast is really fun to see.
How did it feel to direct Epilogue?
Yeah, again, a blessing. It was amazing. I was, man. I mean, come on,
You feel like you were putting a bow on this whole thing?
it was, and there was this one thing. Um, Gosh, I know you have to go soon, but there's this one thing that we did on the show, and I actually I've already mentioned it on another interview, but it's like I found out that Bob Kane had ripped off a lot of his artwork from big little book artist named Henry Vallely
Yeah.
or Vallely. But I discovered this at a comic at a convention, and a friend of mine and I we were like going over it, and we were like, oh my gosh, and we started collecting his work and like seeing all the places where Bob Kane swiped his work, and so for one shot of epilogue, what we did was we took the one panel that Bob Kane had swiped for Bruce Wayne pondering the the criminals are superstitious lie.
Right before the bat
Uh,
comes in.
right. There's that shot, and it's a guy on it's a guy on a phone. It's a cop on a phone. It's the original. So what we did. I took that big little book page and I sent it to the board artist. I went, as much as you can, match this composition, and he did. He nailed it. So Terry McGinnis is in exactly the same pose as the character from the Big Little Book that Bob Kane traced for Bruce Wayne. So that was like an inside thing on an inside thing on an inside thing. But it was also to get to revisit Phantasm and then that ending that was so profoundly sad with Ace and Batman.
Yeah.
That was so tender and it was so cool.
It's moments like that that make me feel like this is the definitive best iteration of Batman.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And there's so many little in jokes in that too, because the Royal Flush Gang, they're all jokes. They're all puns. They're visual puns. 10 is Bo Derek, movie 10. She's got, but she's like Medusa with the hair, but they're dreadlocks. It's like the Jack is literally a samurai. He's the kabuki looking samurai Jack.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was
yeah.
It was so cool. It was so cool that like all these things are just these joke references that made it really fun. But then behind it all, you've got that story that's so sad.
So you wrapped it all up in this really touching backstory, really touching epilogue, entitled Epilogue. We all thought it was going to be the end of the DC animated universe.
We certainly did.
And then the last season shows up. And there's a vibe to the last season where it feels like you were doing anything you could possibly do. You had a Seven Soldiers episode at one point. You had
Yep.
And for me, the episode that really showed you could do whatever you wanted to do with a season is the Great Brain Robbery.
A gift. The Great Brain Robbery was an episode where I was frustrated, frankly. I got to tell you, the one you just referenced about the Seven Soldiers of Victory is one that I was supposed to get, and Patriot Act, and it came late, and there was something they were finessing in the script, and I love the Seven Soldiers of Victory, and B, the prologue with Spice Smasher, who I love Spice Smasher. I was a Fawcett guy. I love the cereal. I passionately, and I was looking forward to doing Spice Smasher. And what ended up happening was I didn't get it. It was just the luck of the draw. It was just a timing thing. It wasn't like it got pulled and it was like so Joaquin directed. But I got Great Brain Robbery, which ended up being the best experience I've ever had at a record, and it was so much fun.
Tell us about it.
It just made up for everything that all my disappointment. And on top of it all, Joaquin he knew my heart was broken about the Spice Smasher thing. And Dave Bullock, who boarded that, they were all so gracious. They let me bring in my materials, all my reference. They let me go over the board first to like, hey, is this okay? You're the guy who knows this character. And I just like, there was one shot that was a little too dynamic because it didn't feel like a serial where you're following him into the water, but it was too cool to like break up. And I'm like, you know what? It's your show. This is fine. This is absolutely fine. He nailed it. So I really was like, but they actually like got me involved and I got to work on it anyway. So that's, that happy ending there with Spy Smasher. But then the Great Brain Robbery, and Michael Rosenbaum and Clancy Brown trading places
Is it?
because we realized that Michael Rosenbaum was Lex Luthor on Smallville.
Yeah.
We had to address it. We had to address it. So
Is it?
that was why the
Is
was
it
written.
true that one of them would say the line and then the other one would imitate it?
Exactly. That's how we did it.
That must have
And
been so fun.
it unbelievably fun. It was it because Clancy's hilarious. I mean, he's Mr. Krabs for crying out loud. He's very funny, but he never gets a chance to be funny on our show, because well, I mean, subtly there's some
Yeah.
humor, but it's always dry and it's always evil, you know. And so this time we got
Deadpan,
to
sarcastic. Yeah.
he got to let loose and cut loose, and it was also like there was a competition for how the lines would be read. And so Michael, knowing that Clancy had to imitate him, would go overboard and say a line like really extreme. And Clancy would be like, it was like, you jerk. And, and then he would do it and he would nail it. And we would just on the floor. And then Clancy would return the favor and would say something as Lex that would just be like over the top and weird, but still like in character. And it was so much fun.
Amazing.
It was the best record ever. It was so good. And then and Julia Landau playing Tallow, she was
Yeah.
so much fun. She's so talented and so great. It was so great to work with her on the show. She was it was laughs and laughs.
The way you treated Tala, because any other show at the time would have treated her like, a stereotypical sorceress. And
Right.
meanwhile, here she's like, hello, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, she was awesome. She was awesome. Ah.
Did you see
And
that particular episode got memed a lot, like when the pandemic hit?
oh, really?
Yeah, because it was that
Oh, the
line.
wash
It
your
was,
hands?
yeah, it was, aren't you
Cause
gonna
I'm
wash your
evil?
hands? No, because I'm evil.
That was amazing. And that was there's a funny thing because Dwayne had originally written the premise to that joke in his outline. It was in the outline, but he didn't have the punchline. It was just one of those things where aren't you gonna wash your hands is there. And then it was Matt Wayne who came up with no, because I'm evil, which is
Perfect.
brilliant, brilliant. Matt Wayne just knocked it out of the park. So I was elated because initially my initial disappointment at not getting that other show, suddenly I'm like, I no, this is the best thing that ever happened.
Also, the moment when Luthor is like, well, at the very least, I can find out the Flash's secret identity. I have no idea who this is.
Yeah, yeah, oh, it's awesome. And the only thing I tell you, the only thing that was a disappointment in that episode, and that's a minor, small thing, but there was a line where Lex Flash is vamping, and he's trying to the big plan, and he's talking about the group to the group, and he is the one who coins the term Legion of Doom,
Yeah.
and they cut that. DC was like,
Oh,
oh, it's too on the nose. Now it's too on the nose,
that's too
and
bad.
you're like, and I was like, it would have been great. It would have been such a great gag. But oh, oh,
20 years later, how do you feel about, even more than 20? How do you feel about the DC
yeah,
animated universe? How do you feel about Justice League?
I I feel like it was one of the hardest shows I'd ever worked on, and it was so rewarding. It was so rewarding. It was something that we didn't know how it was going to work, and if it was even going to be possible. And and by the end, it was like Cadmus arc and, and episodes like the Great Brain Robbery. We just did things that just they stand the test of time still, just like all the other stuff.
They really
It
do.
really is phenomenal. I mean, I knew Batman was going to live forever. I wasn't sure at the time if Superman and everything else was too. And it does. It does. It all does.
They all do. I
Yeah.
still watch the Justice League episodes from time to time.
Wow.
So I'll tell you this. I want to thank you and everybody who worked on Justice League because I said I watched in college. I was in college at the time. It brought me and my friends closer together. We made a drinking game out of it. We would we would
Oh,
start our Friday nights watching Justice League because I would tape it on those. I had
right,
one of those TV VHS things. We would watch it
right.
and then we would start. We would make a drink. We made a drinking game out of it, and then it just brought all of us closer together. We all still talk about it to this day.
So what was the drinking game? Like,
We
how does that
die.
work?
We died a lot, and
Yeah. So
you
so is it
basically
like anybody says something or is it like when Superman,
it
what?
was it was whenever Superman hits the ground or a wall,
Yeah,
because he gets hit.
right,
Because we figured we would die if it was anytime Superman punched something.
right,
Every time it was pointed out implicitly or explicitly that Batman had no powers. So like let's
right.
say somebody has to carry him while everyone is flying.
Yes.
Every time the
Okay.
Flash is inappropriate.
Right,
Uh every time Wonder Woman alludes to her Greek heritage, like
right,
whenever she says Great Hera.
right,
Anytime the Martian Manhunter is a wise old man character.
right.
Anytime
Wow.
Green Lantern makes something with his ring that isn't a laser beam.
Right. That's
And
rare, by the way, because Bruce really he did not like the idea of the constructs. And it wasn't until later, until after we did the Guardsman, that he was like, all right, let's do some shapes. Let's get outside.
yes,
But
but
he
we
was like,
started this with a better world because there were two of them. That's why we started the game.
there you go.
And then the one that murdered us was anytime Hawkgirl used her mace.
That's tough. That's tough. That was fairly frequent.
We
Yeah.
we tried playing it again like a couple years ago, and we're like, we're not kids anymore. We can't do it.
That's,
Let's do quarter
that's,
shots.
yeah, yeah, exactly. M&Ms or something. It's like,
This
by the
is
way, did it?
impossible. Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Mr. Dan Riba. This was
It's a pleasure.
such an
It's a real
honor. And I take it that you were the golden age guy in the crew.
Yeah, yeah, to some degree. To some degree, yeah.
Because I
Yeah, I
feel
mean,
like Bruce and Paul were more the Kirby Silver Age guys. Well,
oh, pretty much. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I like the older stuff. I was but James Tucker was like the Dick Sprang guy, and now he really
Hmm.
liked that stuff.
Yeah.
So there is that. I mean, he did that board for the Legends of the Dark. He did the Dick Sprang
The Dick
section.
Sprang stuff, and then there was the
Yeah,
Frank Miller stuff as
and
well.
then there's was Darwyn Cooke.
Yeah. Oh man. Can you end this with like, thoughts about Darwyn Cooke and Dwayne McDuffie? Because you already talked about
Um,
Dwayne, but
yeah, well, Darwyn was amazing. He was one of these guys that had had his own thing going on in comics. He started and then he went into advertising and kind of given up doing comics for a while. But on the side, he started doing his own thing and saw an ad that we needed people and great. Boom, sends his portfolio in. We're looking at it going, wow, this guy's great. Okay. And fully formed basically. He really like
absolutely.
knew exactly what, because he was doing animation for advertising. He knew, he had very little training, very little to teach him in terms of how to board. Um, he was amazing and a great guy to hang out with. So much fun.
Yeah.
And he you know his style was like that like Bruce saw his animation that he'd done for advertising. That was kind of inspired the Batman Beyond title sequence. Like, okay, you get to, and we have very little time, so it was like everything was planned out, and people on the crew got to do sections of it. I helped clean up the animation. Batman is leaping, the silhouette kind of shot of him leaping. I worked on that. Adam Van Wyck did like the karate thing. Kurt Gaeta did the dancing.
Yeah.
Shane Glines did the shot of Dana turning her head, um, and then James Tucker did the villain lineup that Darwyn took and made a rotation. He flopped it, silhouetted it, and made a rotation out of it. Bruce made a figure of him of Batman with a Riddler figure with sort of epoxy and made pointed ears, and he did this. Then he put it on a Lazy Susan and rotated it, videotaped
awesome.
it. Darwyn turned that into a thing, and Glenn Wong did the sculpture of the Bruce Wayne head that we filmed also, and then turned that into the Justice lady with the scales. That's Bruce's own statue. That's in his house. He filmed that. So all these things, all these little clips were given to Darwyn, and he put it all together and made this masterpiece.
Awesome.
It was extraordinary.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Mr. Dan Riba. This was an honor.
My pleasure.